Hello and welcome to Premier League All Access with me, Sam Matterface, talkSPORT's chief football correspondent. Alex Crook is with me as always. He doesn't look very happy. I wonder why. We're going to dissect all the weekend's footballing action from the Premier League with the former England and Sunderland fullback Micky Gray, our Manchester correspondent. It's been a busy weekend, a huge Sunday, and this is what's coming up on the show.
Erik Ten Hag with his team selection got it wrong. I think he got it wrong with his in-game changes. Not really too sure what role Mason Mount was playing. I'm not sure why Rashford was left on the field for as long as he is. But the players have to take responsibility. It's a derby game. Show some pride in your shirt. Show some pride in your performance. We didn't see that from Manchester United. It was limp, that second half. It was pathetic.
Could they finish in the bottom half?
Without a doubt they can.
It looks like they thought, right, okay, so in 5 years' time we want to be really competitive and really go for it. So we'll start nurturing this talent now, build this team spirit, and in 5 years' time we'll be successful.
Well, have they got the patience for that?
That might be the case. But yeah, that's the question, isn't it? Have they got the patience for that?
We sit here now, they're the bottom three teams. I think they'll be the bottom three come the end of the season. I think they're probably the worst collection of newly promoted teams we've ever seen. And I think Forest, Palace, Bournemouth are all going to be quite grateful for their presence.
Well, we're at Hotel Football in the shadow of Old Trafford, which is quite ironic, really, seeing as Manchester United just spent the last 2 hours chasing shadows. Gentlemen, how are we? Okay?
Well, after that, it's been a big problem, and it's certainly that first half, that performance. I did not expect to see that from Manchester United. In a derby like that, you've got to turn up. If you don't turn up in a game like that, you get caught out, and that's what's happened today. Okay,
so you can ask a simple question, how are you? Micky's already on a rant, so we'll get to the football in just a second. Before you get into the football, everything okay? You're pleased to be in Manchester? I know you got caught up in a Halloween party halfway through last night.
Quite fancy being at home right now, to be honest.
Do you?
Not sat here with you. Yeah.
Okay, well I thought Manchester City were absolutely brilliant today. They could have probably won by 6 or 7. Let's kick off then with the most eagerly anticipated game of the weekend for everybody who wasn't a Manchester United fan. The thing is, it did actually go to form. Look, Manchester United were understandably nervous going into the game, quite rightly so. They hadn't been in great form. They limped over the line against Copenhagen. We knew it was going to be a big task for them today, but the levels of difference between the Manchester City players and the Manchester United players are quite startling, really. It was a shambolic performance. Who holds the blame this time? I mean, I know we always take the mickey out of you saying, can we blame the Glazers for this? But this is one of those performances, I think, where, okay, yes, that's the root cause, but Erik Ten Hag has got to carry the can, hasn't he?
Yeah, before we get into that, can I have a minor grumble against the Glazers? Okay, it's been a big week for Manchester United. They've lost an icon. They've lost Mr. Manchester United. There have been 2 games where tributes have been paid to Sir Bobby Charlton. Brilliant tributes, and Manchester City more than played their part in that today.
Yeah.
Where are the owners? Are they there to pay tribute to one of their former players? Have we seen any comment from the Glazers about the passing of Sir Bobby Charlton? So first and foremost, it's always the Glazers' fault. It will always be the Glazers' fault as long as they're in situ. However, Erik Ten Hag with his team selection got it wrong. I think he got it wrong with his in-game changes. Not really too sure what role Mason Mount was playing. I'm not sure why Rashford was left on the field for as long as he is. But the players have to take responsibility. It's a derby game. Show some pride in your shirt. Show some pride in your performance. We didn't see that from Manchester United. It was limp, that second half. It was pathetic.
Yeah, it was a disgraceful performance, actually, if you're completely honest. And the fact that there wasn't in-game changes, there wasn't a reaction. When they went 2-0 down, I thought, well, he's going to make 3 or 4 changes here and try and, throw them, go after them. It's like the Alamo, just keep going. But they didn't. They had nothing. They literally offered nothing in that second 45 minutes. And I mentioned it during the show that we did earlier. The whole idea that Erik Ten Hag has been given this power by the Manchester United board to bring in players that are associated with him. 2/3 of the players that have been brought in since he became the manager of the club have either played for him before or they've played against him in the Eredivisie. He knows them well. So they've obviously given him power, so he has to be criticised when it goes wrong. They were set up wrong from the beginning. You and I had a conversation at literally 2:30 this afternoon when the team came out, and I said to you, the midfield's going to be too narrow. Manchester City will keep it wide. They'll have problems in the wide areas. If we could see that at 2:30, why couldn't he react during the game?
Well, first and foremost, Sam, I think I have to say what Crookie said there. From the beginning of the game, when we saw those teams come out, it was the wrong 11. There was no balance at all. How can you bring in a left back when he's been crying out for one because all of his left backs have been injured for the last 3 or 4 weeks or even longer than that? And then he plays a centre half at left back. There's no balance to your defence at all there. Now, where's the structure moving forward in front of that? Amrabat got took off in midweek at half-time. He got took off today at half-time. He's not good enough for the Premier League. From what I've seen so far, he's not quick enough.
That's a rush to judgment, isn't it? He's only been here for a couple of games.
Judge what you see in front of you. He had a brilliant World Cup, winning the ball back for his country, and then he was starting the moves off for his country. I've not seen him do that once for Manchester United. Look, we were all waiting for him because he played left back in a couple of games, didn't he? And then we were all waiting for him to play in that central midfield position. Now I've seen it. I just don't know where Manchester United go. What else does he bring? If he's not winning the ball back and not playing it to somebody who's got a bit more guile and a bit more quality, then what is he bringing to that starting 11 for Manchester United? His last 2 performances have been really poor. I feel for Rasmus Højlund. I've got to say I think he's an absolutely top-class player. But if that young man's not getting service from the 2 players who are either playing either side of him, he's going to struggle in a Manchester United 11. And he was probably their best player today. He got took off. There was massive boos in the stadium when he got took off before Marcus Rashford today. Him and the goalkeeper are the only ones who can come off that pitch today and have their heads held high. It was a shocking performance.
Okay, so, I mean, look, you're very associated with Manchester United. You were in the youth ranks at Manchester United, and there's a lot of emotion about it. I know a lot of the fans left before the end of the game because they felt the emotion too. From a City perspective, it was a very good performance, but not a great performance, and I think Pep Guardiola would probably admit that he thought that they could score more goals, and we may well focus on them in just a second. But I think it's a Manchester United story only because it was such a shambolic performance. Instead of analysing that, let's kick it forward and see what happens next, because a lot of the fans that were ringing us straight after the game were suggesting that they thought that the clock was ticking on Erik ten Hag's era. You've been a big supporter of him. You've asked for faith and patience, and the reason for that is because they've invested a lot in him. But what are you thinking now? Do you still think he's the man to bring them back from this long way back? There was a quote from Roy Keane saying that the journey that Manchester United will have to go on to get anywhere near Manchester City is long, winding, and will take a lot of investment. Is he the man to lead that project?
Well, I'll go back to my point at the top of the show. They're not going to get back to where they want to be under this ownership. So it's almost pointless talking about who's in the dugout, because they've tried with the proven winners, the Van Gaals and the Mourinhos. They've tried with the club legends in Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, and they've tried now with a new, dynamic, up-and-coming coach who did very well at Ajax. And let's not disrespect Ajax, they're going through a nightmare at the moment, but they're as big in the Netherlands as Manchester United are in England. So it's not the pressure of being at a big club that's getting to Erik ten Hag. So it's almost a pointless conversation. If you fire him, you have to reset the project, because you've already pointed out that all the players that have come in basically have been signed for Erik ten Hag. So I don't see the point, because we've been here before. So
can he continue to lose? He's lost 5 games out of 10. Can he continue to lose like that? So are you saying that even if he loses 10 games out of 20, he still should have the keys to the dugout?
It's difficult, because obviously football is about winning. But actually at this football club, it's not just about winning, it's about playing in a certain style. That is the most alarming thing for me this season. It's not the fact they're not winning games, it's the fact even when they are grinding out wins against Copenhagen and against the Sheffield United team, who might be the worst the Premier League's ever seen, they're still playing appalling football. That would be a bigger concern, and I think he has to go back to being the Erik ten Hag that patrolled the touchline last season, the brave Manchester United manager who makes the right team selections, he makes the substitutions at the right time, he makes the big calls and doesn't pander to ego. He's lost his way. I think that is a little bit of a knock-on effect of what's going on right at the top of the football club.
Okay, so what do you do?
At the moment, well, you look at the next couple of games, because I think we're all in agreement. Even every single game Manchester United have won this season, they'd not deserve to win them games.
They've been lucky, haven't they? I mean, they were lucky at Burnley not to be behind before they scored. They were lucky to beat Nottingham Forest. They were lucky to beat Brentford. They were lucky to beat Wolves. They were incredibly lucky not to get beat by Copenhagen in midweek.
And I think this is the only time in the first 10 games where they've lost 5 of the first 10 games. That happened last time in 1986. They're going to go out the Champions League because the performance has not been good enough. Whether they get to the knockout stages or not, they'll go out of that competition early, won't they? Because everybody seems to be a lot better than them. The players that he's brought into the club have not made Manchester United better, barring Højlund, who I want to see a little bit more of. But the rest of the players that have come in, for me, from what I've seen, have made Manchester United worse.
Would you sack him?
No, I don't think so.
Would you sack him?
At this moment in time, no, I wouldn't. But then you've got the big dilemma then of getting to January. If they're still not playing well, if
They won't spend money in
well,
January.
that's the problem.
I understand why they wouldn't sack him, because I've been saying this as well. You know, they've invested so much in his recruitment strategy that to sack him now would almost be folly, because they've put so many of their eggs into the Ten Hag basket. But if you're Jim Ratcliffe, let's just, fantasise that actually he might well take over the sporting direction of the club. Let's just suggest that might be the case, because so much of this takeover stroke change of ownership stroke investment has been total nonsense and just a ruse, really, that it may not ever happen anyway. But if it was to happen, is there a danger for Erik ten Hag that he would want to make a statement immediately?
I think if he does that, he'll make a statement in the board. And it looks like Richard Arnold probably is going to be the full guy. Maybe John Murtagh as well. So I think he'll start there.
And what's that going to change?
And what if he brings in a new sporting director? Then they may have an opinion as to what path they want to go down in terms of who's in the dugout.
But that needs to happen before January. If this takeover doesn't happen before January, then you're in the same situation.
It's not a takeover, it's a partial piece of investment.
25% of the club. But then if he comes in and the money's available for Erik ten Hag, with the performances that you've seen from Man United this season, do you trust him with another 70, 80 million?
Well, they won't do that in January anyway.
They're going to have to do something, Crookie, because if you're losing every single week and having to watch that every single week, you have to change something.
Could they finish in the bottom half?
Without a doubt they can.
Potentially.
Without a doubt they can. Look, they've been saying all season, we're waiting for Shaw coming back, waiting for Malaysia coming back, we're waiting for Wan-Bissaka coming back.
We're waiting for Mason Mount to arrive.
Yeah, exactly.
He's not the only one,
And the
mate.
players who've walked through the door
Amrabat,
haven't been good enough.
Andre Onana's saved the penalty and made a couple of big saves today. And
played well in the
everyone's delighted about the fact that he's made a couple of saves. That is his job, isn't it? I mean, he's supposed to be doing that. He's cost them more games than he's won them so far this season.
Yeah.
Do you think them players are playing for the manager? Because if they're not, then there has to be a change. And from what I saw today...
I'm not sure who Rashford's playing for, because at the moment he's not playing very well. Bruno Fernandes is not playing very well. Amrabat's obviously not playing very well, but that might be getting used to the Premier League. It's a difficult league to get used to. You speak to any manager who brings in a player from a foreign league, there's always an adaptation period. Some hit the ground running, but it's a very few number. It's a very small number that just hit the ground running. It takes time.
You said he was brave last
difference.
season.
Yeah.
Is he brave enough to leave Fernandes and Rashford out of the team?
I don't think he is. And I think it's a problem. I pushed him on it, on Marcus Rashford, specifically after the game. I said, what's happened? This is a guy who couldn't stop scoring last season. He's had one big chance today. Marcus Rashford a year ago buries it. That would have made it 2-1. They're back in the game. He misses it. He scored one goal this season. And he said, it will come. We'll keep giving him chances. He just needs one to go in. And I said, is that why you leave him on? Because obviously the crowd were far from happy. It was Haaland who went off and not Rashford. And he sort of flipped that around and said that Haaland had run himself into the ground and we were protecting him. But I tell you what, if Marcus Rashford and Bruno Fernandes and countless others, they showed the same endeavour, the same energy, the same commitment as Rasmus Haaland, United wouldn't be in this predicament.
Well, they are in a predicament, and they are floundering at this moment in time, having lost 5 of their 10 league games so far this season. But Manchester City, who are still off the pace in terms of, they're not top of the Premier League, but they've closed the gap today to Tottenham to just a couple of points. Haaland scoring 47 Premier League games in 45 games, on course to smash Andy Cole's record of 65 as the fastest player to reach 50 Premier League goals now. 65 games it took him to reach 50 Premier League goals. Fascinatingly, after the game, I think Pep Guardiola told him off because he thought he should have got more.
Walked onto the pitch, pointed the finger at him and said, you should have scored more goals today. Now that's the difference, right? If the best manager in world football right now, of criticising a player who came off the pitch and scored 2 goals and said he should have scored more. So he's able to criticise his players, but every time Erik ten Hag does that, he loses a player. That player doesn't want to play for the manager anymore. As we've seen before, I want to bring Sancho into this conversation because we know what's happened with him over the last month and a half. That's the difference. Players wanting to play for a manager, they want to play the style of football that they want to play. But what I'm seeing in the red side of Manchester is players playing for themselves and not putting in a shift. I could have went out on that pitch today, Sam. I'm not saying I'm better than any other players, because I'm not.
You probably would have been better at left back than Lindelof, let's be honest.
I could have run around more than some of them players today. They're not trying. In a derby game, there was 4 yellow cards for Manchester United today.
One was for time wasting.
The other one was for discipline as well.
Time wasting, you're losing 3-0.
It's ridiculous.
I will say that Manchester City fans, I have tried to steer them down the Manchester City direction, but they're not having it.
Just on Haaland,
they're
though.
pulling it back.
Just on Haaland, they kissed and made up, him and Pep, by the time they got in the tunnel. And actually, I was still interviewing someone in the tunnel, and I got a barge from behind, and I turned around, and it was Erling Haaland. So not only had he bullied my defence out there, he then tried to bully me in the tunnel as well. You big giant.
Yeah, well, it shows how strong he is, because if he moved you out the way, he's obviously some specimen. In terms of Manchester United, you did just quickly go back to them because you mentioned Jadon Sancho, and it was an interesting discussion we had with the caller after the game. And it was that he's very big on discipline. Everyone turns up on time. Everyone has to say sorry if they do something wrong. There's fines for this, fines for that. You've got to behave in a certain way if you're a Manchester United player. And you've got to make sure that you don't answer back and all that kind of stuff. Yet the indiscipline on the playing side is seemingly tolerated. I don't understand. The two don't really make sense, do they? You know, the idea that you can be such a disciplinarian and, you know, banish someone to train with the kids because they haven't said sorry to you, yet Marcus Rashford and Fernandes don't do any defensive work, and that seemingly is a free pass. It doesn't really come together for me. It's inconsistent, right?
If I was playing for any manager, Premier League, Championship, wherever it might be, and a manager told me to do a job, if I wasn't doing that job on a regular basis, I'm watching. I'm not playing, I'm watching the games. Yet they get away with it every single week because they've got big names. It's about time you give those younger players an opportunity. Let's see what they can do.
Okay, the second goal for Manchester City, I think we should eulogise over that because it was absolutely terrific. Brilliant. It started with the goalkeeper, it went all the way through the pitch, one touch, popping it around, it was beautiful. Listen, at the end of the day, Haaland's got far too much room at the back post. He's the best striker in the world and somehow he's been left free to head the ball in. But the construction of the goal was very, very good. Right, let's turn our attention to the second derby of the weekend. It happened in West London. It was another blue day. Well, talking of teams that have been disappointing at home, Chelsea once again failing to win at Stamford Bridge. They dominated the first half but couldn't construct enough chances or clear-cut ones. They hit the bar. Cucurella had a chance. Madueke was impressive. Sterling and Palmer came close, but Chelsea didn't score, and then Brentford did twice in the second half. Ethan Pinnock and Brian Mbeumo. The second goal was pretty irrelevant really because it was so late that they'd already won the game, Brentford. But they always seem to have a game plan and a strategy against Chelsea. And I think before we go into the problems at Chelsea, and they are multiple, we should talk about Thomas Frank. He did a Monday Night Football where he explained how his team work differently when they go away to a top six club. I mean, it's a bit kind to call Chelsea a top six club at this moment in time, but their defensive structure was absolutely superb and their whole game plan worked.
You've got to go in with the structure. If you're going to places like Chelsea, you go and spend millions and millions of pounds. Brentford are not supposed to go there and win. That's the last 3 times I think they've been there and scored a lot of goals. So he gets it completely right. And let's not forget certain players are missing from their starting 11. Ivan Toney being one of them, who was the mainstay, the centre forward who holds the ball. Absolutely, yeah. So they've got players missing as well. But you've got players who are actually playing against Chelsea who want to go and win that game. One thing to talk about as well is Sterling should have had a penalty in that game. I think that was a bit of a game changer, albeit they got beat in the end, but I think that's a big talking point in the game because that was a penalty in my eyes. This
is when the ball's floated over the top by Cole Palmer and he seems to get a push in the back from Hickey, I think it is, as he's about to sort of head the ball. I mean, there's no sort of guarantees that it's going to go in, but it looks like a penalty. Do you think it was?
Yeah, I'm pleased Mickey's flagged it up actually because I was watching in the press room at Arsenal and talkSPORT's Adrian Clark shot me down when I said, well, that's a pen. He said, you've gone soft. But my view was the same as yours. It's a clear shove in the back.
If he scores otherwise, if there's no contact with him, he scores. He heads the ball in the back of the net from 2 yards out.
And it makes a massive difference to the outcome.
Of course it does.
Unlike the penalty at Old Trafford that Ten Hag put down as a turning point, this was actually a turning point. I think if Chelsea take the lead in that game, it could be a very different outcome.
Yeah, I mean, they created a lot of chances and didn't take them again. I mean, ultimately that's been the story of their season so far. They dominate possession. I think only Manchester City have dominated the ball more in the Premier League this season than Chelsea, but yet they can't construct opportunities. And it does worry you going forward for them because Nicholas Jackson doesn't seem to be able to make the right runs for a striker. He seems to sort of be very static in the middle of the goal. He doesn't understand. I mean, maybe Rory's young or whatever, he needs to be coached, but his movement isn't good enough.
Well, the big worry is, Sam, how much money have they spent?
Not much, mate. Only about £1 billion. I mean, you could probably have written off Manchester United's debt with it, but you know that's nothing, really, is it?
And before Todd Bowley walked through the door, I think everybody knew that Chelsea needed a centre forward. So you go out and you pinpoint and you go and say, right, who's the best centre forward that's available at the time? And you go and spend like Chelsea do and bring in the best centre forward who's going to score goals for your team. It's not worked for them. They've got everything else, But trying to put them all together and put the glue and gel them all together is not working for Chelsea on a regular basis, which is why they're losing
everything
games.
else? I'm not sure they have got everything else.
Well, they
I'm
think
not sure
they
they've
have
got
because
much.
they've gone out and they think they've bought the best players in certain positions. I mean,
The best players for what though? For what? For
holding
2027?
midfield players.
I mean, no, but I'm being serious because at this moment in time, it looks like they thought, right, okay, so in 5 years' time, we want to be really competitive and really go for it. So we'll start nurturing this talent now, build this team spirit, and in 5 years' time, we'll be successful.
Well, have they got the patience for
that? Might be
that?
the case. But yeah, that's the question, isn't it? Have they got the patience for that? Because I don't think really, at this moment in time, Chelsea have got any chance of competing. The only team they're competing with is Manchester United, which fallen giant can finish the lowest.
I think it was quite key, actually, and quite interesting. You pressed Pochettino on the fact that the club has spent £1 billion. Do you think you had enough on the bench to show for that £1 billion? But he wouldn't answer the question.
Well,
he said, I don't want to talk about that.
He did say it was unbalanced, didn't he? He said it's still unbalanced, the squad. And it is unbalanced because the goalkeeper's probably not good enough, with all due respect.
He played quite well at the weekend.
Okay. And what would he do? Commit a couple of... I forgot, if a goalkeeper makes a save now, they've done a brilliant job. Yeah.
You know he hates goalkeepers. It's a slight problem.
I don't hate goalkeepers.
But you're also asking a manager in Pochettino, right, to come through the door. Is he actually signing the players, or is he having to work with the players that are brought into the club? Now, is that perfect scenario for a manager who wants to walk through the door and go, right, I want to work with A, B, C, D. If you're not letting me bring those players in, who are you bringing in so I can then start to work with those players and try and gel the best 11 who are going to work week by week?
Listen, I know that they've obviously been hampered by the fact that Christopher Nkunku has not been available for them. There's no guarantee that
But he's not a centre forward either.
No, he's not. He's more of a sort of number 10, plays off
got
a
a few of them.
striker. But Chelsea have collected them like panini stickers. But goals have been a real problem for them. They've scored just 14 goals at home in the Premier League in 2023, which is the same number of Premier League goals that Leicester have scored. The only difference is Leicester were relegated in May.
There were some great stats, wasn't there? Was the stat that Ethan Pinnock's won more games at Stamford Bridge this calendar year than Chelsea?
Well, Brentford boss Thomas Frank has won more Premier League games at Stamford Bridge in 2023 than the last two Blues bosses, Maurizio Pochettino and Frank Lampard.
That is amazing.
Combined.
Wow.
And the Blues have lost their 8th Premier League home game in 2023. Their most home league defeats in a calendar year since 1986. And the bad thing is I can remember that year too.
Tottenham next?
Tottenham away from home on a Monday Night Football, which
Good luck.
I'm very much looking forward to, as you can imagine. It's been a very tough time to be a Chelsea fan, I think, and Andy Jacobs was texting me after the game saying that is the sort of game that once you've watched it makes you never want to watch football again.
He's not the most positive supporter in
At
the
the
world,
best of
Andy.
times.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. I mean, we listen to him on a regular basis after the weekend's matches, don't we? But I do think it will happen for Chelsea, but I think it's going to be too late to push them towards anywhere near
I
those
think it will
European
happen
positions.
to Chelsea. It's just the date, isn't it, that when it starts happening.
Yeah.
It may well be in 3 or 4 years' time. Have they got the patience for that? We'll soon see. But I think the one thing they must do is stick with Pochettino, because he's a top manager and he's very calm in these situations. Let's talk about Tottenham Hotspur, top of the table Tottenham. Top spot Tottenham, 2-1 winners away at Crystal Palace. That was Friday night. There's no point in going to the wheres and wherefores of the game. But the first thing I'll say is it was handball. All right, you've cost me a clean sheet for Mickey Van Der Ven. It was a handball. Second thing I'll say is I think they're good. I think they've got a bit of character about it. A lot of people saying that when they play someone good and they give those many chances away, other teams will score. But I think they'll be up a level. I mean, all the chances they concede are after they've won the game.
Well, football's all about momentum.
Yeah.
Sport at the top level is all about momentum. And what their fixture list has enabled them to do is build up momentum and enable Postecoglou very quickly to get his messages across, very quickly for the fans to invest in him as a real feel-good factor at that stadium now. So I think they are going to last the course. I mean, they'll definitely finish top 4, Spurs, and I think they'll be a lot closer to the Championship than maybe people expect, as long as Maddison and Son can stay fit, because again, I think Richarlison as a number 9, it's not going to happen. In fact, I think he'll be out of the team now because Brennan Johnson made a real positive contribution when he came on. But you mentioned Van Der Ven in jest there. I think he's exceptional.
Brilliant.
I mean, the speed at which he covers the distances. When you think as a Palace player, well, this could be problematic with Tottenham. All of a sudden, out of nowhere, Van Der Ven is in there and he's won the ball back. He's one of the signings of the season so far.
Statistically, the fastest central defender in the Bundesliga last year, 22.8 miles per hour was his fastest speed. And when he puts down the accelerator, there is absolutely no catching him. Interesting what you said about Richarlison. Hasn't been a number 9 since the 3rd game of the season. They switched that and put Son through the middle. Son hadn't scored in the first 3 games. He's got 8 goals since then. He's been in terrific form.
They've been outstanding, Tottenham, this season, and it's probably down to that one signing of Maddison. I mean, you could probably look at Van der Ven, you look at the two full-backs that they've got, love getting forward, which I love to see, overlapping full-backs, but the big thing for me is under Postecoglou, they're absolutely loving playing for him. He's got no ego about him, he comes in front of camera, he's interesting to listen to, he has a laugh and a joke with the media, but he just says to his players, go out and play, go and enjoy yourselves. And if you're winning, that's all great. I want to see what they're like when they lose a game.
I love the fact that those fullbacks come inside
Absolutely
and make
brilliant.
up extra numbers in the middle of the park.
Absolutely
I think that looks. I mean, it gives them so many other options, and it allows their wingers to stay wide. So Kulusevski can stay wide. Brendan Johnson, I think, will be in the team like you.
Big time.
Stays very, very wide.
Do you know what's good about it, Sam? And it might not be there for everybody to see on the eye, but those fullbacks pushing into those inverted positions, they're winning the ball higher up the pitch.
Yeah.
Because they've got more numbers in there, it's making it more difficult for the opposition who they're playing against to get out then. It's got to work their wonders to get out with. So when they win it higher, with the quality of Son and Maddison, might have to make a couple of changes on those flanks, as you mentioned there before. Even Kulusevski, I mean, I'm not his biggest fan, I have to say, but Maddison has just taken him to another level.
But interesting, they can do that and they can win the ball high up in those circumstances because of the pace, as you mentioned, of Van der Ven. So they can put more players forward, knowing that if the ball goes in behind them, he's there faster than anybody else and able to sweep
and
up.
Romero, you have to give him a mention. I think he's been outstanding
okay.
as well.
He hasn't got as many cards this year as well, which is particularly...
He's calmed him down. Postecoglou's calmed him down.
Yeah. What do you think of the dressing room music, though? Dolly Parton, Kenny Rogers, Islands in the Stream. You having that? If you were in a dressing room and someone started playing that...
If you're winning and it works, stick with it.
What was the worst song that you ever had in your dressing room? What was the worst dressing room anthem?
I have not.
You must have got into someone's car and gone,
really
what the hell is this?
know.
Turn this off. This is rubbish.
I've not. Maybe the Proclaimers or something.
Ever got into a car with him?
Oh no.
Oh mate, if you get...
You wouldn't fit in my car.
Would Haaland?
No.
You get into a car with him and your anthem's S Club 7, Reach for the Stars.
Oh no. Oh yeah, you told me that once, absolutely.
They're touring at the moment. He was trying to get me to come to Leeds and watch them.
Yeah, well, I thought it was a birthday treat for you.
I passed up the invitation.
I was trying to buy you a present.
Take a lot to get me to Leeds, by the way.
Well, yeah, you're banned from Leeds as well, aren't you? Right, let's talk about Sheffield United. Are they soon to be looking for a new manager? Arsenal beat Sheffield United by 5-0 at the Emirates Stadium on Saturday afternoon. The result leaves Blades chief Paul Heckingbottom pretty much fighting for his job, really. It's because it's the worst start statistically to a Premier League season ever, which is quite some achievement. His team are rock bottom. They've managed just 1 point from 10 games. They've conceded 29 goals. Are they going to sack him?
I think so. I think it's harsh because obviously they sold his two best players just before the start of the season. He's lost Chris Basham and John Egan, his captain, two mainstays of their defence. But 1 point from 10 games, not too many managers survive that. And I think the difficulty for him is 3 of the next 4 matches are against sides that will be in and around them in the fight to stay in the Premier League. And I think the board will be looking at that and thinking, have we seen enough from recent performances to suggest that actually if we leave him in charge, we're going to pick up some positive results from those games? I think their answer will probably be no. Certainly the way they played against Arsenal at the weekend. Arsenal scored 5 goals without getting out of second gear. Sheffield United, very easy to play against. I think the board will feel that if they make a change, and we all know it's going to be Chris Wilder, if they do make that change, then he might just give them a short-term uplift and maybe get some points on the board and give themselves a fighting chance. They're gone already, they're not going to stay up.
Yeah, no one stays up from this sort of rank. The only team who have ever taken 1 point from their first 10 games in Premier League history before this season are Sheffield United 3 years ago. Not a record that you want, and they were well beaten on Saturday against Arsenal. They only had 5 shots on target and scored 5 goals.
Didn't they have the same amount of shots on target or something?
I think they had 12 Arsenal and Sheffield United 10.
Yeah, it's incredible. I mean, are we surprised? Are we surprised at the bottom of the table and they're not picking up wins?
No.
Because, like you said, they sold their 2 best players. Paul wasn't really able to bring in players in this summer before the season started. So I think we all knew they were fighting relegation, even before the season started. It was always going to be hard. I'm not sure about the change. Chris Wilder, he's been in there. Yes, he achieved something his first season in the Premier League, but when we were behind closed doors, they were really poor, which is why he lost his job. Then Paul had to take over and he worked wonders actually getting them back into the Premier League. I thought they'd been fantastic. So he's got a bit of merit for that one, absolutely, yeah. So You make that change, things are not going to change at Sheffield United.
In which case, is it a bit harsh to sack him? Because actually, as he pointed out yesterday, their season is not going to be defined by a trip to the Emirates. Their season has started with 6 of the top 9 from last season.
Sam, what they're looking at right now is who can we bring in who can get us back into the Premier League the following season.
Are they,
That's what they're looking at.
or are they emergency appointment? We've got 3 winnable games. Let's try and get something from them and drag themselves out of danger.
If they're clever enough upstairs at that football club, whether it's Paul in charge or whether it's somebody else who's going to be walking through the door in charge of Sheffield United, they've got to be thinking about next season, who can we keep at the club, who can we recruit, and who can help us get back into the Premier League, and then we can hopefully stay in the Premier League. It's a long-term thing, because if you're thinking about it now, whoever walks through that door, they're going to be a failure because they're going to get relegated. There's not 3 worse teams than Sheffield United. Whatever points they get at the end of this season is not going to be enough to keep them in the Premier League.
Could they, by some miracle, survive?
No.
Because Everton get so many points deducted that they actually only have to leapfrog 2.
Well, that's what they're hanging on to, isn't it? I mean, if Everton get deducted 12 points, which they've been talking about, which would now, I think, put them on -2, they've got to start over again. So they're only 3 points behind Sheffield United. So, it's a big problem there.
That's if they lose. I don't think they'll lose 12. I think they might get 6 or 9 or something like that. But, that will be decided at a future date. But certainly there are problems mounting up for Sheffield United. What about Nottingham Forest? A poor day at the office for Steve Cooper's team, but a brilliant day at the office for Liverpool. Winners by 3-0 on Sunday afternoon. It was a dominant performance right from the very beginning. They've had a real problem conceding goals. And actually, what we couldn't believe, Mickey, is they turned up with a back 5. They changed their formation, Nottingham Forest, to try and keep Liverpool at bay, and then conceded a goal on a turnover on the halfway line, and it ended up being 3-on-1 at one stage. I mean, it was ridiculous, wasn't it?
It was absolutely ridiculous.
And that goal changes the game.
Yeah, it does. And that's after 29 minutes or 30 minutes, I think, the first goal. So then they're chasing the game after that, but the second goal even after was just diabolical. I mean, we've been talking, haven't we, on this podcast about players not trying a leg and not getting themselves back into position. You look at the fullbacks or the wing-backs not getting back into position and players just running in behind them and just simple taps into the back of the net. You can't win games every week like that. This is why these sides find themselves at the bottom of the table every single season, hoping and trying to find a way of getting points from games.
Are you concerned about how many teams
I like Steve Cooper, by the way.
So do I. Well, listen, he's someone I know quite well. He's someone I speak to on a regular basis. I think he's a very, very good manager. He'll be absolutely furious with it. I saw him on the touchline, actually. I could tell by the look of his face that he was probably sort of fuming about the way they conceded that first goal. But there is quite a lot of sides down the bottom of the table who are just trying to avoid being one of the 3 that are going to go down, aren't they?
Let's be honest, there are a lot of bad sides in the Premier League, and there's a lot of teams who are going to be grateful that Luton, Sheffield United and Burnley were the 3 teams that came out from the Championship, because barring a points deduction at Everton, we sit here now, they're the bottom 3 teams. I think they'll be the bottom 3 come the end of the season. I think they're probably the worst collection of newly promoted teams we've ever seen. And I think Forest, Palace, Bournemouth are all going to be quite grateful for their presence.
Yeah, well, Bournemouth beat Burnley by 2-1 on Saturday afternoon. Philip Billing scored a wonderful chip from inside opposition territory, wide on the left-hand side, which I think we probably would have been talking about for a lot longer if Harry Kane hadn't then chipped the goalkeeper from inside his own half for Bayern Munich in an 8-0 victory just a couple of hours later. But Burnley have lost 8 of their last 10 matches, the first time since 1888-89 they've been that bad at the beginning of a season. There's mitigating circumstances. They're Burnley, they're in the Premier League, they've just been promoted. But is Vincent Kompany a bit naive?
Well, they got away with it last season, and a lot of people will say this. Sometimes your goalkeeper can make mistakes and you get away with it in the Championship. You don't get away with those mistakes when you come to the Premier League. They've made 15 changes in the summer. Last season they made 18 changes, or they brought 18 players into the club. So that's 33 new players in the space of 2 seasons. And then trying to play the style of football that he did in the Championship in the Premier League is not going to work. We've seen it with so many sides before. When they've come up, they've not changed too much. They haven't got the quality to win every single game, Burnley. They've got to fight for their lives to try and pick up as many points as they can to stay in the Premier League. But playing the style of football that Vincent Kompany wants to play, he needs better players. And to get those better players, you've got to spend more money. Burnley haven't got that amount of money to bring the players in he wants. I like Vincent Kompany. I think he was brilliant last season. I think he's great in front of camera. You can see his heart and soul's into it. But let's not forget, he had the chance to leave that club on 2 or 3 occasions. Wanted to stay there and stick it out, but it's not working for him right now.
The question I asked Mickey was, is he naive? He didn't answer it. He just went around the houses.
I said he is.
Well, I've sort of been there and
said
done
he
that.
is.
We spoke about him a lot on last week's podcast.
So how's he put it right then?
Well, I think he needs to sacrifice his principles and make them more difficult to beat because they're too easy to play against at this moment in time. It doesn't look as if that's going to happen. And I think a lot of talk about Sheffield United and Luton and how poor they might be. I think Company and Burnley have got away with it a little bit because I think they're equally bad. That was a bad defeat for them. But just a quick footnote on Bournemouth. Obviously, a lot of pressure on Iraola going into that game. Excellent goal from Billing, as you say. But I want to pick out two players they've signed for the Championship: Antoine Semenyo and Alex Scott, who's going to be a real force in the Premier League. They're a young player.
They've been waiting for Alex Scott to start playing because he's had an injury and he's been highly touted. We've spoken about him a lot. Wolves were linked with him in the summer. I don't think that was ever going to happen, but I think Bristol City may have been using them as a stalking horse to raise the price for him. But a lot of people have looked at him because he's a clear talent. Finally, he's on the pitch, and finally they've started to win. Yeah,
and Semenyo as well has made a real impact under Iraola. Yeah. But two players plucked from the Championship and plucked actually from a lower half Championship team. I think the Bournemouth recruitment department deserve a little bit of credit for that.
Okay. Everton beat West Ham by a goal to nil. Certainly they deserve a little bit of credit. Sean Dyche does because they've had a tough start to the season, but they've won 4 of their last 6 games in all competitions, which is great for them. And they've started to move up the table, put a little bit of daylight between them and the bottom 3. Dominic Calvert-Lewin's finish was terrific, and actually they could have won by more against West Ham, couldn't they? I know that West Ham had chances too, but there was 2 brilliant chances in the first half. One in the first half, one in the second. Harrison's opportunity where he should have played in somebody else.
It was a similar situation to the one we were just having a conversation about, wasn't it? Nottingham Forest, in the Nottingham Forest game. Exactly the same situation where Harrison's running through, he's got 2 players either side of him. He could have played one in when he had his first touch, then he could have played a reverse pass, I think it was Onana or Decore on the right hand side. Wanted to go on his own, got no sting behind his shot at all. They're the chances that the top sides take. Now Everton, I don't know if they've changed the system or their style over the last 2 or 3 weeks, but Sean Dyche has got to go back to being hard to beat. If they do that, Everton will be completely fine. Okay, Villa beat Luton by 3 goals to 1. No one expected anything different. That's 12 wins in a row at home for Unai Emery, who celebrates his first year in charge. Brighton did drop points at home to Fulham, which was a bit of a surprise. But then again, not really, because Fulham always get something from the Amex. Who would have predicted that Brighton would win?
You sort of bullied me into that.
No, we didn't.
So
no, we didn't.
Let's just have a bit of context.
No, we didn't.
We have a charity bet every weekend in the Sunday session. Perry picks a result, Sam picks a result, and I pick a draw, usually, right? So when they said to me Brighton Fulham, don't tell us, draw. So you almost bullied me away from going for the draw.
Perry. That wasn't me.
And therefore I had to pick a Brighton win. If I'd just gone with my gut instinct, which would have been draw, we'd have been.
So you're blaming everybody else for not taking responsibility for your own.
Bullied me in the tunnel.
Your own actions.
So the charity's lost about 145 quid, I think, today.
If you could just put that in the pot, that'd be great. Wolves 2, Newcastle 2. Look.
Yeah, let's
get into this. There's a couple of decisions this weekend that everyone just sort of like skates over because it's too difficult to get into it. Because it's all right to make stupid mistakes now. Wolves had a penalty given against them. Hwang Hee-chan went into a challenge with someone on the edge of the penalty area. He kicked through the ground, stopped himself following through with the contact. Fabian Schär was trying to clear the ball from inside the penalty area, and the referee gives a penalty, right? It then goes to VAR, and VAR doesn't overturn it. 1, should a penalty have been given in the first place? 2, should the VAR then have looked at it and gone, hold on a second, that's a clear and obvious error?
As Gary O'Neill said, it's never been a penalty. Despite what you said when we were watching Match of the Day on Saturday.
Yeah, I had half a barrel of whiskey by that point.
It's never a penalty.
Watched it back sober since.
Because he's making a genuine attempt to clear the ball. He's got no idea the player's going to run across his path. And B, as you say, because he's kicked the ground. Jared Gillett, I believe, watching on VAR, not a particularly good official, so no surprise he's got this one wrong.
He's supposed to be a VAR specialist.
He's rubbish. But this is what VAR is for. Clear and obvious mistakes. It was a clear and obvious mistake. You need to press the button and say, look, you've got that one wrong. It's not a penalty. Restart the game.
But the other issue we've had this week, right, that took ages. The one at Bournemouth where Rodriguez is offside, but the line's foul and David Cooper can't get his ruler out in time or whatever. It takes 5.5 minutes to decide that actually it is onside or offside, whatever it was. To me, I thought it's so tight. Just we're ruling out a goal for this. And I think we've got to the stage, and I go back to Friday night when I was at Crystal Palace, when it clearly touches Andre Onana's Jordan Ayew's hand. in the penalty area before he scores his goal.
Yeah, but it touched his body first. Does that not matter, does it?
Well, so you can
As it
handball
rolled
it.
down, as it rolled down his chest.
Oh yeah, Mickey.
I thought
if it
if
rolls
it
down
didn't
your chest,
touch your
you can
hand.
just like pat it on the floor. You can do a 3-pointer. Yeah, you can do whatever you like.
Right, well, let's talk about the Rodriguez one, right? When the lines came up, first, it was green.
Yeah.
To say he was onside, I think, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Then they went back to the monitor in the VAR and had a look at it, and then it turned red. So you can imagine the frustration from Vincent Kompany and those Burnley supporters who've done all that travelling to that game.
But do you know what I feel like at this moment in time? Is that we've got bored with having a go at them. They're making such bad decisions, but because we've done it too much, we're almost sort of like, oh, we feel a bit sorry for them now because we've been giving them too much.
And we've gone back to
stick.
3 or 4 years ago where it was taking so long. 6.5 minutes one of them was.
That's ridiculous.
It's too long.
And actually, I spoke to a coach at a Premier League club this weekend, and he said the whole system's flawed. And I think he's right. I think Howell Webb needs to go right back to the drawing board and have a complete reset.
Well, are they panicking because of the mistakes a couple of weeks ago when Liverpool's goal?
I haven't got a clue what the problem
up.
is, but they're making bad decisions. Stuart Atwell has to rule out that goal for handball. There's no doubt. You can see it. I saw it. I was sitting there. I was watching a tiny monitor. I was in the ground. I saw it flick off. It's a handball. Fine. Just rule it out. It doesn't take that long. It's clear that the ball's changed direction. You know, the Hwang Hee-chan thing. Come on. It's never been a penalty.
So there's 4 or 5 massive decisions this weekend. You've got the Sterling one, which we all felt was a penalty.
Yeah.
You've got the Wolves one, which we all agree wasn't a penalty. You've got the handball, which I think everybody watching it thought was handball.
I thought there was a handball in the West Ham game as well. I can't remember what it was that I saw, but I'm sure there was a handball in the penalty area by an Everton player. But I didn't get to see a replay of it. And I think we're not highlighting it enough. And I think the broadcasters aren't highlighting it enough because they feel that they need to give VAR a bit of an easier ride.
Yeah, well, that's not the road to go down. I think we have to keep calling them out. I actually respect Gary O'Neill for his post-match interview. Possibly risks a fine from the FA, but I think he said what we were all thinking. What's the point in speaking to Howell Webb? What's the point in speaking to the referees? They basically don't know what they're doing.
It is their job to get it right. That is the key thing. And yes, I'm all for supporting referees. I'm all for making sure that we don't put them under undue pressure, but they have to make the big calls and they have to get them right more often than not. But more often than not, that isn't the case.
Can I just quickly touch on the penalty in the Man United game, Man City game today, Sam?
Oh yeah, you
The
didn't
one
like
that wasn't given.
Oh, the one that wasn't given.
Harry Maguire, it was.
Well, this is
I
another
thought it was
example.
worse than the penalty itself.
Exactly.
He's hanging on to him in the 18-yard box. Haaland can't get away from him. He then falls to ground, looks at the
He's
referee.
basically
waving,
riding
asking
him
for
at
a
one
penalty.
stage.
So why does that not then go to VAR?
Don't know. Couldn't work it out. Crazy, absolutely crazy. Manchester City should have got another penalty for that. That
would have been good.
If you're refereeing by the standards that you started the game with. Crook, thank you very much. Have a great evening in Manchester.
Unlikely.
There's some great places where Manchester City fans hang out. Mickey will take you to.
There aren't any Manchester City fans in Manchester.
Oh! There's a couple over there.
That was a quote from Police Tree, wasn't it, over the last couple of days?
Oh dear, don't get yourself into further trouble. That's it from... He's being heckled now. Right, that's it from us.
That was tongue-in-cheek, by the way, don't at me.
All right, at Alex_Crook on X. That's it from us. We'll be back on Thursday to preview all the weekend's footballing action. Enjoy your midweek football. There's quite a lot of it in the Carabao Cup. I'll be back here at Manchester United on Wednesday night for the Carabao Cup 4th round game between Manchester United and Newcastle. Who knows what score that will be?